Yo, what's up guys? It's your boy Franklin here, and today I wanted to talk about Dynamaxing. Now, I mentioned before in one of my videos that I was going to create a video in regards to Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing as a whole, and how I feel about it in a new competitive meta that is 8-Gen OU. And I did record that video, and I was thinking about what I was saying in that video, and how I thought that Dynamaxing was unhealthy but not broken. But after the recent Smogon usage rates came out for the month of November, as well as the opinions that I've been accumulating from Smogon themselves, I'm starting to think that Dynamaxing has become more and more unhealthier, and to the point that it actually is broken. So I'm here to talk about Dynamaxing and Gigantamax in general, since Smogon recently announced that they will be suspect testing both Dynamaxing and Dynamaxing as a whole, rather than one separate from the other, which I think it's understandable from their point of view. It's essentially the same mechanic, but a bit different, because the Pokemon using them are different from the Pokemon that will regularly Dynamax. So, for those of you guys who are, more of the casual players and don't play competitively and have no idea what I'm talking about in regards to new mechanic in Generation 8, I'm here to explain everything. Explain my opinion based on what we see and based on what other players have seen and based on what the data tells us in the Gen 8 overused. I don't know about Ubers. I don't know about any tiers lower because they haven't been established yet. More likely we're going to have established tiers maybe come April, but that's still a far away timeline that we haven't met yet. But anyways, here's my opinion in regards to Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing. So, first and foremost, it's kind of funny. I'm going to do some Dynamax rates here, but it's not really a good example, since in competitive play, you'll see more and more of the Dynamaxing mechanic be used to its fullest potential. This is just for more casual play. I'm just going to play this in the background for now, since I want to, kill some time. Anyways, Dynamaxing. For those of you who are not familiar with Generation 8, Dynamaxing is a brand new mechanic that was introduced in Pokemon Sword and Shield. With Dynamaxing, you can essentially Dynamax with any Pokemon you want. It can be a baby Pokemon, it can be a mid-evolution, final evolution, it could be legendary as well, but for the sake of Generation 8, the 3 legendary Pokemon introduced in this game are not able to Dynamax, because they're essentially like anti-Dynamax Pokemon, which is kind of ironic, kind of funny, but here we are. It's Game Freak, it's 2019, anything can happen. But essentially with Dynamaxing, as you're about to see right now in this animation, pretty much your Pokemon gets a glow up, and a big time glow up, and they start becoming the size of Kaijus. But the interesting effect with Dynamaxing is that your Pokemon gains HP based on total level of Dynamaxing. If your Pokemon has a 0 level Dynamax potential, it means that it only gains 50% of its current HP. Whereas if a Pokemon is maxed out at 10, it gains double the HP. So essentially, your defenses, your stats don't really change except for your HP, and that's it. In addition, you will notice as I hover over Darmanitan's move pool very soon, that these Pokemon will gain additional effects with their moves based on the typing of it. For example, you're about to see Darmanitan, since Icicle Crash now becomes Max Hailstorm, which means it's a specific amount of BP depending on, or base power depending on what kind of move it is, what's the original base power of the move, and it summons a secondary effect. For example, Ice brings Hail. Fire-type moves bring Drought or Sun. Water-type moves bring the weather of rain. Rock-type moves bring in sandstorms. Grass-type moves activate grassy terrain. Psychic-type moves bring psychic terrain, and so on and so forth. And you can see here as I hover over the Darmanitan's moves. So, like I said, Max Flare gains essentially the Flare Blitz that I have in Darmanitan gets increased in base power, and it has a secondary effect for sunny. Essentially, it's a sunny day. Fighting-type moves allow Pokemon to increase attack. Ice brings in hailstorms, and Bug-type lowers special attack, and so on and so forth. And each typing has its own unique effects. I won't go through all of them, but you get the point. For Dynamaxing for a specific Pokemon, it can pretty much change the way a Pokemon is used in competitive gameplay. For example, Darmanitan, while most times will be scarfed, it can break through the choice lock mechanism of of the choice item, which is Scarf in this instance, and can use any move it wants. And there lies my biggest issue with Dynamax. While as a Pokemon like Darmanitan, which is already completely busted as it is, not only because of its great move pool, its high attack, its unique signature ability, Gorilla Tactic, gives it +1 attack, but can only be locked into a specific move, which makes sense for Choice Band or Choice Scarf to be on this Darmanitan. However, with Dynamaxing, it completely negates that. You can actually do whatever you want. You can click any move for 3 turns. Now, I know a lot of people might get frustrated with this video because they don't really want to see a new mechanic be banned in competitive play just because it's deemed broken by Smogon players. And Smogon players have a reputation that casuals see differently. And that's just me, stating the truth. And the data is there to prove that Dynamaxing is a bit too much, especially with the current Pokemon that dominate the overused tier. The top 5 Pokemon you will about to hear are the ones that are currently used based on the month of November usage. Dragapult is number 1, Darmanitan is number 2, Ditto is number 3, Excadrill is number 4, and Corviknight is number 5. I believe Excadrill is number 4. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. That was based on the memory of what I saw yesterday in regards to what was released. But that goes to show, while yes, the Dexit, I guess what people call it, that remove all the Pokemon, is supposed to create a more competitive play. The issue with that is because there are a limited number of Pokemon, that means we're going to see the Pokemon more and more every time. Most likely it's going to be on your routine. I believe Dragapult's usage was in the high 30s, so 1 in every team is using a Dragapult. Darmanitan is the same usage as well, and Ditto as well. So those 3 Pokemon are still going to be seen in about 1/3 of every team you will face competitively in the Smogon overused tier. With Dynamaxing, or Gigantamaxing, I should say, we should talk about more about what Gigantamaxing really means and why they're treated as equal entity of competitive play. So Gigantamaxing, if you guys don't know about, are specific Pokemon can only Gigantamax. So for example, Pikachu, Eevee, Charizard, Alcremie, Hatterene, Grimmsnarl, Dreadnought. There's about 25 or 26 species, if I can recall correctly, that can only Gigantamax. The difference between Gigantamax and Dynamaxing is rather the secondary effects of the Pokemon using these moves are much more beneficial and are much more, maybe they could be useful in situations. So first and foremost, if we're going to talk about, let's say, Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl's Gigantamax takes on a new animation, just like the rest of the Gigantamax Pokemon. However, their Dark type moves, rather than decreasing defense, it has a secondary effect that is not lowering defense, but rather it's called G-Max moves, in which not only you're going to deal base damage in accordance to Dynamax power, but also induces drowsiness with Pokemon. Charizard has a Fire Spin if using Fire type move. Hatterene also has a G-Max move in which causes 100% confusion. Pikachu's Electric type moves cause 100% paralysis. So it makes sense why Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing are treated as one entity, because any Pokemon can Dynamax, only a few can Gigantamax, but the mechanism behind the new gameplay is essentially just one. Now, speaking of Dynamaxing, this is where my opinion comes in. in regards to why it's a bit unhealthy. And I already have briefly mentioned why it is, but I want to get to take a step further with what we have so far, what kind of Pokemon are able to fully abuse Dynamaxing powers, and why I consider it to be an over-centralizing mechanic in Generation 8. First and foremost, any Pokemon can Dynamax. Right off the bat, it's a bit of a red flag there. Any Pokemon can Dynamax in OU? So you're telling me Pokemon like Dragapult, Darmanitan, Corviknight, Bisharp, Seismitoad, Toxapex, Ferrothorn, Rotom, Excadrill, Tyranitar, Dragofish. Any Pokemon can Dynamax. A few can Gigantamax, Corviknight being one of them. However, in the recent trends of competitive play and overuse has pointed the fact that Dynamaxing is a bit more preferred than Gigantamaxing, because with Gigantamax Pokemon, it focuses more on the Pokemon itself rather than the entire team. With Dynamaxing, you can focus it on any aspect of your team. All 6 of your Pokemon can Dynamax. Only one can Gigantamax. And sometimes all Gigantamax Pokemon aren't as useful compared to other Dynamax Pokemon that could be potentially game-breaking for any single matches. Now, the 3 Pokemon I'm going to bring up are the main culprits of why Dynamaxing is seen as an unhealthy and broken mechanic introduced in a generation where there aren't a lot of options because of Game Freak's decision of cutting 500 Pokemon. The first one is Darmanitan. So, like I mentioned, Darmanitan's new ability, the Galarian form, Relic Tactics, in which it can increase its attack by 1 stage. However, it's locked into only 1 move only. So you can slap on a Choice Scarf because it already limits 1 move, or a Choice Band to gang double attack, but you only use 1 move. Now, Dynamaxing's main issue, and I think is the reason why it's broken, is that it can unlock the Pokemon from a choice locking. If I Dynamax my Darmanitan, which I just showed you, it can break free from Choice Scarf, and it can use any move it wants. It negates the limitations of a certain ability of Pokemon, like Darmanitan. Which I think is inherently broken. If you're going to use a Pokemon that's shitty Choice Scarf, it should only use 1 move. However, not only your Pokemon is going to gain HP, but you're punishing your opponent into believing that this guy's not going to really Dynamax because he's Scarfed or Choice Specs or Choice Banded. But Dynamaxing negates completely. And that causes a certain Pokemon that's choiced to snowball its stats when it shouldn't be able to do so in the first place, if you get where I'm going. The next culprit of Dynamaxing is Hawlucha. Now, you might be wondering, well, there's no Tapu Koko, there's no Lele, there's no Bulu, there's no there's no terrain setters like the Tapus that are able to let Hawlucha abuse it and do whatever it wants. Well, with Dynamaxing, it solves all that. And Hawlucha can be a one-man team. Now, granted, Hawlucha isn't a top 10 Pokemon in usage as of right now. But the issue with Dynamaxing allows Hawlucha to become a one-team Pokemon. And what I mean by that is that when you Dynamax Hawlucha and it goes for Thunder Punch, it sets up Electric Terrain as a secondary effect. So not only you're about to hit your opponent with 110 base power Electric type move, but you can set Electric Terrain, and if it's holding Electric Seed, it gets a +1 in defense, and because of Unburden, it gains doubles base speed. You see where I'm going with this? And while it's Dynamaxed, it can throw off a Wind type move, which is usually a Flying type move, which is usually Max Airstream, which gives it +1 speed. If it throws you with the Max Close Combat, or Max Knuckle in the Dynamax version, it gives off +1 without the consequences of lowering defenses from close combat, or even the misses from high jump kicks, since Dynamax moves cannot miss. Now, granted, it loses Swords Dance because it transformed into Max Protect, which essentially is a protect from any Gigantamax or Dynamax moves for that turn. Essentially, is a protect on steroids. It'll protect you from anything. However, with Pokemon like Hawlucha, starts becoming a more offensive threat, a more threat that requires you to counterplay. And it goes into my final Pokemon of being a culprit of an over-centralized mechanic, which is Ditto. Now you might be wondering, wait, Ditto? Like, are you kidding me? Ditto's Ditto. Like, we know what it does. Yeah, but in order to see how Ditto effectively works, you gotta have to take a step back into various generations. When it got Imposter, it essentially became an anti-meta pick. Which is kind of funny because everyone's using Ditto. Like, you think Ditto's the meta. Well, you can think of it that way. But the player that sees the mechanics and usage stats of Pokemon will say, no, it's anti-meta. And of course, opinions will differentiate based on what you believe is meta or anti-meta. But Ditto's hidden ability, Imposter, along with pairing of a Choice Scarf, means that, let's say your opponents start going crazy with their Dynamax Hawlucha, and has +2 in attack, has +2 in speed, it has Unburden. Or, let's think of another example. I'll think of another example since technically Ditto won't be able to copy Unburden. Let's say, a Gyarados. And Gyarados is another culprit because Gyarados falls into the same path as Hawlucha, just minus Electric Rain. If you start increasing attack, it starts setting rain, it gets Moxie boosts, and it's just ridiculous. Ditto can copy a Dynamax Gyarados' stats increases, such as +2 in speed because of Dragon Dances or Max Airstreams. It can copy the attack increases from Gyarados' Moxie. And because the Scarf is slapped on the Ditto, essentially it can get the stats and it will always be faster, regardless. It will always be faster regardless of how many stat increases it gets. And Ditto can revenge sweep you nasty. Because it's Scarfed, it can ensure that it's the fastest Pokemon used in the current battle. And possibly the entire team. Now, with Dynamaxing, however, you can actually Dynamax your copied Pokemon. So not only you can copy the Dynamax, not only you can copy the Pokemon stats, but when you Dynamax it, it becomes the Pokemon itself. Meaning you can get the abilities while you're Dynamax. So, for example, if your Dynamax copied Gyarados starts killing Pokemon, it gets +1 attack and starts going out of control. And this is where the anti-meta and the meta opinion forms. If Ditto's always used all the time to counter Dynamaxing Pokemon, it might be meta. But if it's against Dynamaxing, then you can say that it's probably anti-meta. But the point is, the fact that Ditto has a third of usage in OU makes it seem as if, that something might be wrong. Because Ditto in previous generations wouldn't say it didn't have any usage. That's not true. Because it did have usage in, I believe, around the summertime of 2018, where it's popularized by certain players that were running a more defensive core. And Ditto is often used as a pick against potential sweepers that are dominating metagames, such as Landorus in Generation 7, Greninja in Generation 6 and 7, so on and so forth, but you get the point. And Salamence as well. A very niche pick, but Ditto can copy those kind of sweepers and start accumulating kills, gaining stat boosts. It just becomes a problematic Pokemon itself. Now, I'm not saying here Ditto is a problem, but Ditto essentially is an inherent problem because of a broken, over-centralized mechanic that is Dynamaxing. And Gyarados, I will say, as I briefly mentioned, is also a culprit of a broken mechanic as well, because when it Dynamaxes, its water move becomes a rain setter, which means its stab becomes even more powerful. And Moxie, it's able to take on more attack boosts when it kills Pokemon, and it becomes a bit busted. And because of Power Whip, now it actually got Power Whip this generation, which I'm kind of surprised it did. But I'm not surprised because Game Freak can do whatever they want, apparently. But with Power Whip becomes a grass type move that doesn't miss. Meaning Pokemon such as Rotom, which was Rotom and Seismitoad, which usually kind of wall Gyarados, can't wall it anymore. And can't rely on misses because Dynamax moves cannot miss. and it becomes like this move, like max overgrowth that you're seeing right now, and it sets up a grassy terrain. Now, based on the usage stats, there are Pokemon in there that are Gigantamax Pokemon potentially are viable in Generation 8 right now, such as Hatterene. Hatterene can set up Trick Room. It's probably, based on its speed stat, it's probably the premier Trick Room setter. It has the tools needed to Gigantamax and just kill Pokemon as well. Pokemon such as Corviknight can Gigantamax as well, as its signature wind, or I keep saying wind, but flying type attacks become a defog, which is pretty cool because it already has active defog. But nonetheless, it's pretty cool and unique. So, I guess this video I just wanted to showcase the issues with Dynamaxing in general and why it is a bit broken, and I think it needs to be it needs to get going, it needs to get out of this meta before it just becomes another repetitive meta that we didn't want in Generation 8. Now, Game Freak, as you know, has probably, I don't know what their idea is behind Dynamaxing and then trying to balance everything by cutting everything out. While I do agree that to a certain extent it does bring a new meta, there are still Pokemon from previous generations, such as Generation 7, that are still premier. The premier walls and premier offense. Rotom, Ferrothorn, Toxapex are the premier defensive wall, quote-unquote walls, in Generation 8 that have pretty high usage in the previous generation as well. Pokemon such as Excadrill and T-Tar are still in the top 30. Excadrill is in the top 5. And they were pretty good in the previous generations as well, since Generation 5. Now, I don't think Game Freak really thought Dexit very well. I don't think they really thought about the competitive consequences of adding a new mechanic while limiting the number of resources that we have to either counter it or simply deny it. And that's another issue that Dynamax caused. And it's not that the Pokemon are broken themselves. It's the idea that a unbalanced, over-centralized, and unhealthy mechanic is putting a metagame on a stranglehold. Now, you as the player may not be really experiencing that, which is okay. Everyone has their own playing style, but this is specifically for Smogon. Now, yes, there are Smogon players that play Smogon rules on Wi-Fi battles, and obviously they play it on Pokemon Showdown, which they get all their usage stats from the players themselves. And that's how we come up with those numbers. But to summarize this video, I believe that Dynamaxing, it makes the game of checkers that is Pokemon into a much simpler yet abusive form of checkers, if you get my analogy. And while I agree that it is a brand new mechanic, and it's unfortunate to see a mechanic this new being suspect tested later on in the future, which has already been confirmed, it has to be done in order to make a competitive meta viable again. Something that will allow the players to play the game they're supposed to play without worrying about getting reverse sweeped by Dynamaxing or worried about, Dynamaxing completely changing the momentum. Now, I will say a final note in regards to people comparing Dynamaxing to Z moves and Megas. Dynamaxing lasts for 3 turns. You gain a specific HP stat, let's assume double because that's the max, for 3 turns and gain Z moves essentially for 3 turns. You might argue, well, Megas had stat changes as well. Yes, they did, but only for specific Pokemon. Kind of reminds you of Gigantamaxing, which isn't as broken compared to Dynamaxing. The other players might say, well, Z-moves were never banned in Generation 7. Why should Dynamaxing be banned? And you might be wondering, and I will tell you, yes, that is completely true. But having these Z-moves have secondary effects for 3 turns is a bit busted. It's more powerful. It actually is a fusion of Megas and Z-moves. They form together and they multiply by double. That's the result of Dynamaxing. Any player can use it, any Pokemon can use it, and granted, Gigantamax Pokemon are a specific number, But anyone can use it, anyone can abuse it, anyone can win, and anyone can change the momentum of a game. And while yes, we do have a limited number of Pokemon that's supposed to make this a more balanced game, Dynamaxing throws that out the window. And we can see based on the November usage of these Pokemon, it's clearly a problem and it might need to be let go from Generation 8 overused tier. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know this is a very controversial opinion of mine. I will say that Dynamaxing in general should be treated with Gigantamaxing as well. I think it's uncompetitive, it's unhealthy, and it's broken. So that's your boy Franklin. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys are able to discuss about whether or not you think Dynamaxing is broken. You know, if you have any opinions, any questions, just comment down below. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's your boy Franklin, signing out. Respect everyone's opinions. I know some opinions might be a bit, you know, on the iffy for a lot because it's a brand new Pokemon game and a brand new mechanic introduced. But please be respectful, man. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I'm just giving you stats, my logistical issues with the mechanic itself, and that's it. Nothing more than a friendly conversation from your boy Franklin, signing out. Peace.